Welcome to the American Intelligence Media. I'm Douglas Gabriel, your host, and tonight I am with Christopher, and he is about to give us an update, Christopher Strunk, and he has been our man in the swamp wrestling alligators. We're not even sure what he's going to tell us tonight, but it has something to do with all the different intelligence agencies. Plus, we're hoping for an update from you. Welcome to the show, Christopher.
Thanks. I don't know. I think the last show was when I was discussing when I was about to be met by the Secret Service in Albany.
That's right. If you'd like to catch us up on all that, that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, after I met with these people, which was, a limp, it was like shaking hands with a dish rag. A guy in bulletproof vest not wanting to see They replaced the fellow who called me with a 19-year veteran of the Secret Service, and they said, "Well, that guy was just with us for 7 months, and we deployed him overseas the day before." Right. So I had printed everything up and bound it, and he wanted to see it, and I was going to give it to him. And obviously, if he was only 7 months, that meant he was Trump's guy, not the prior agency employees. But that anyway, all he really wanted to know is, number one, was I a veteran or was I an attorney? And I said, better dead than being an attorney. And he sort of blanched at that. But he wanted to know if I was a veteran. I said, yeah, and until the day I die. And that and then he said that I own a gun. All right. I'd never heard this before. And of course, the answer to that is no, I don't need a gun. As long as I've got my quick wit and sense of humor, I don't need a gun. And I'm a big guy, so you take more than one bullet to take me down. But the point is that he was not interested. First of all, I asked him, are you familiar with the Senior Executive Service? He says, yes, I am, and I don't want to discuss it. And I said, well, okay, then basically we've got very little to discuss. Why am I here? And he said, well, I wanted to find out if you were a threat to Kirstjen Nielsen. I said, well, why heavens would I be a threat to Kirstjen Nielsen? I'm just following through on the executive order that came out on the 12th saying anybody coming up with evidence of fraud should provide it accordingly in a timely manner. And I did. And I did it in an organized manner. And I thought that Michael did a splendid job of pulling it all together along with you folks. And I couldn't have said it any better in terms of laying out court admissible evidence. So he said, well, and I had all of my prior cases, the ones at the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces, and the bound volumes, and his eyes bugged out, seeing that I had actually been there. And he says, I don't want to see any of that. And I said, well, then I don't think we have a reason to meet. You wasted my time. And that I said, basically, whatever I can do to help, let me know. And I handed him both my business card and my other card, which is got my home address on it. So, and he, I extended my hand and I left. But basically, he was like, you'd think the guy, he looked muscular, but he shook like he was. It was limp. It was a limp shake. I'm not used to that very often. So anyway, but that was a heads up for me. And I talked to Bill Van Allen, who was a veteran, an officer, veteran, disabled, and that I said, hey, Bill, how do these people ask you about guns and veteran military affairs? Yeah, he says I didn't go to the Veterans Hospital, and the first thing they want to know is, do I have a gun? Right, so this is a really big deal. I've never run into this before, and that, but they think that I was a threat to Kirstjen Nielsen, and that was an eye opener, Douglas. And that, as you know, I delivered a copy of the brief that went to the Court of the Armed Forces to Department of Homeland Security, where the General Counsel was, who is a member, Nick, who is a member of the Senior Executive Service. And then I went over to the court, and basically I think that who knows, but certainly when Clinton says that, and Obama is talking about the 17 intelligence agencies, and the fact that I've got active court cases in the British Indian Ocean Territory courts involving the U.S. intelligence services. I'm the trustee of a Bahamas corporation representing quite a few people. I figured it was important to find out what the threat matrix was that they're carrying, because I don't have a passport, nor I might have to get one, and I want to find out if they're going to limit my traffic, because I'm part of a supposed threat matrix. So anyway, I found out all of the 17 agencies, and I found all the people involved, and I'm going to do what's called a FOIPA, a Freedom of Information Privacy Act request. Different than a FOIA. A FOIA is a third-party request on information as opposed to a first-party information. Whereas I'm directly involved in whatever they're doing, involves me directly. This is 5 USC 552A, and it's actually the most useful one, because they have to do something. Because if in fact they're violating my Fourth or Fifth Amendment rights, and certainly they're violating my First Amendment rights, and they're going to try to limit my ability to travel or to own a weapon if in fact I want to go. You know, he asked me about hunting season, and I was a hunter before I went into the war, and in '66, and I said, well, you know, I haven't been hunting since I went into the military, because it killed my appetite, right? So anyway, I said to him, I said, you know, but certainly we're into small game season and bow season. I could see deer dying all over the road and being stirred up. So he got into this whole issue of hunting and everything else, and I said, I'm not interested in it. And certainly, I hope you guys are going after Sydney in Delaware County, where there's Muslim training camps. We can hear automatic weapons, and it seems like the FBI is protecting him. And his eyes bugged out, like we've given information he might have to do something about. You know, Department of Homeland Security. We call it, Eric Phelps and I call it the Department of Homeland Security. So it's anyhow. So it was a big negative. It took half of my day, and I hope Tom Donahue, the 7-month recruit, is not sent off to the equivalent of Timbuktu. But I'm going to find out what happened to him. But I am doing a request of any information having to do with my name or those associated with me, and I want to see all the matrix. I want to see how everything is knit together, because it does affect I've got cases involving cryptocurrency and the involvement outside the banking system in a .io internet organization, which is laundering illicit currency, and is actually called Bitblender, and is actually involved in laundering money so that they can carry on illegal drugs, money laundering, terrorism, et cetera, et cetera. And we've got them dead to rights now for over the last year. And that we're filing other cases. There are people using all sorts of surreptitious money laundering schemes. So I want to find out what my meeting and what my involvement with this writ does to me, has done to me with the CIA and others, because I know the CIA has got a dark side. So I've been working on that all day, and a series of 17 FOIPAs, and with 17 notaries, et cetera, and I'm going to be at the same time back copying Pence to see if I can wake him up. You know, you called Sessions Rip Van Winkle. Well, I think Pence is Rip Van Winkle. He's a very quiet character. You know, Joe Biden.
Betsy would agree with you. That's a fact. She was very, very adamant about this earlier, that she is really tired of Pence doing nothing, a big zero. So, okay, let me get this straight. So the guy that first called you up was interested from...
Tom Donahue, right,
didn't show up. Some other guy shows up, tries to somewhat slightly, but I know he can't, intimidate you by referencing rifles and hunting and guns and being in the military as if you're some kind of danger. And now you're going to look into whether or not they have any information on you in any of the 17 intelligence agencies that reference you being some type of threat. Now, in all of the work you've ever done before, has threat or in any way anything like this ever come up before?
Never. And I can sit down in their office and they actually discuss the details of the cases. And this is U.S. attorneys, all right? So this is very unusual. There's something going on, Douglas, and I have to get to the bottom of it. Because as I say, I'm a trustee of a Bahamas trust, and we've got maybe 4 or 5 other clients in which I'm the name of the plaintiff in the various cases. What somebody is impersonating a British tax collector in Africa and shaking down people in various countries as a British tax collector under the .io website structure. And it's like ransomware, but worse. They're shaking down hundreds and thousands of dollars with the threat of the British tax system. So we've got these cases coming. I've got a criminal complaint that we're filing next week, and it means a lot that I should get this in the works. And of course, I ran into this with Brennan and Michael Shrimpton when I was bringing Shrimpton over. I spent $3,200 to bring him over to Brooklyn, New York to testify. And Brennan and the CIA intervened at the London embassy because I had a subpoena for him in a state court. And Brennan actually denied a temporary visa so that Shrimp could come to testify. So I've run into this before, and the CIA operates out of the London embassy, and this is really no good stuff. They're hiding all sorts of crimes. This is back to the point of who this guy Sotoro is. We know who he is, but the point is that the fact that Homeland Security was propping up Sotoro and the CIA was Sotoro is, to me, it took 10 years of my life away. Okay, and I'm extremely angry at the fact that this government is run by foreign intervention, and of course, all of this fits into what I'm intending to do with the writ, moving the writ to the next level. A friend of mine speaks multiple languages. He is writing letters in Portuguese and Italian and Spanish and even French, because all these Central and South American countries, I'm giving notice of my application on this question of whether or not the social networking, which is being used in our country, and the evidence of the fraud it's mind-boggling to me. I've seen a lot of fraud, Douglas, but this takes the cake. I just heard Congressman Getz, who had actually saw them with trucks moving stuff out of a polling place, and the cops pulled a gun on him, and he showed him he was a congressman, right? And they were about to arrest him. I heard an interview.
And then they still told him to get out of there. They still told him to get out.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Yeah. I'm looking at fraud right before my eyes. I'm a congressman, and you're ordering me to leave. Amazing. Now let's go back. Let's make sure people got what you just said.
Oh, you saw this thing, obviously.
Yes. Yes.
You've got a better internet cockpit than I have. I've got one computer, and that's it. So
I have Truth News headlines, and I have Betsy and her team, and they always keep me informed. I don't have to look at anything; they just give it to me, and I go, "Oh my gosh, thank you." When I go out and look, I can't find any of the things they give me. I don't know where they get them.
Well, Tyla does a great job. I have to compliment her, and and she has every right to be as emotional as she is. I mean, what I see going on, it really gets me stirred up too. But rather than I just act. I go out and I ask a lot of questions in notarized form, and that represents 17 new complaints if they don't respond within a certain period of time to each agency, and I will get what I need to get under FOIPA. I've never used FOIPA before, but I've used FOIA and as a third party, and so I have some experience with this. But back to where I'm going with this.
No, right there. Let's stop right there.
This writ is not over. Yeah.
You are going out to the 17 agencies to find out if they have you in any kind of threat matrix, to find out why they might think that you're a threat, seeing that this, I would call him a bozo agent who came in and tried to muscle you and act like he's some, a powerful secret well, he's from the Secret Service. And so you would think that he'd be strong and have a nice, strong handshake. But this guy probably doesn't protect anyone. He probably sits behind a desk. But the point is, you're not a threat to anybody, period. And secondly,
I was wearing my best pinstripe suit that when somebody put me up for president, they sent me a $600 coupon to go to Men's Warehouse. I was wearing that suit with a white shirt and my best tie, but I had sandals on too. But that's between me and my history. But the point is that I was good, so I knew if he was going to shoot me, he'd have to shoot a guy in a suit. Okay, and that
a pinstripe suit, by the way.
I was better dressed than he was, right?
Exactly.
So that was my war I pulled on him.
And so now, so that's what you're doing now. But that's because you do international business, and you do not want the 17 intelligence agencies going after you. So you got to find out what they may have on you, which you've done a lot of work in many areas. I would be shocked if they haven't really thoroughly researched you and they have a nice folder on you. But we'll find out because you're doing all 17 agencies. Now, that's different than what you just made reference to as your next step. And I'm not sure exactly what your next step with the writ is, except to go after these 17 agencies to make sure that they do not later use that against you to say that because you did what the president asked you to do in an executive order, which is to turn in any election meddling, and you did clearly in the right form to the Supreme Court, to Homeland Security, to the General Counsel of Homeland Security, and I think a few other places, and you made sure that it went up to
the president. No, we served on the vice president. And it's all of this work was done under the executive order of the 12th of September, and all of my work has been under the 21st of December 2017 executive order on a national emergency on the question of foreign interference with human trafficking and everything else. That's basically followed my case that I filed in October of 2017 on the illicit use of Bitcoin. All right, and I did a video on that at the time, which is on one of my websites. But the point is, I've been after human trafficking. I've never, on an international level, been after the electronic interference in elections. Now, that's the tantalizing thing. And boy, Michael and you have really given me an education on how that's done with the man in the middle capability. And that all of the countries in South America and Central America that we have been looting for the last 200 years would certainly like to join me in Washington to create a new coalition which would support Trump in his efforts to protect us against European interference in our Western Hemisphere affairs.
So is that your next step?
So I want to
with the American Organization of States, right? You're going to go to the OAS,
right? The OAS, right?
The American Organization of States, and you're going to go to a certain human rights court, and you're going to say to them that basically you don't want interference in the Western Hemisphere, but also particularly through election meddling.
Electronic interference, yeah. Voting is the only thing really that we have, and I've said it many times in front of federal and state judges, and that's where I actually get worked up, Tyler. That's where I get emotional. That's really the only thing we have as citizens is our vote. Anything else is not even to be discussed openly. Okay, but the point is that the court, the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights, was set up in conjunction with the International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights that was put in place in '65, and it was adopted by everybody except for the United States by 1992, and that we refuse to give all of our citizens the same rights and specifically the important part, because we still remain under an 85-year banking emergency, which makes our existence under a military Marshall process, and that what the Soviets did when they converted over to the Federal Republic is to adopt the International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights, which essentially differentiates, it makes a difference between a human being and a corporation. And it gives the human being standing in a way which is totally different than a person entity. And that's what's in the ICC PR, okay? Very important international treaty. And that it's got its setbacks, but we could, Canada, for instance, took reservations on it, and England certainly doesn't recognize the freedom of speech, whereas the Russians do. And I was shocked. I was shocked at how they adopted this within their constitution that they wrote in the early 90s when they converted from communism to whatever they're doing now, but they're under a constitutional republic. Under 11 time zones, good heavens. It's bad enough under 4. But what we have, though, is a failure of this country to protect the human being.
You're so
and
right. And giving corporations higher rights than humans. And the thing that makes me sick is these people who represent these corporations, especially Silicon Valley, cardboard cutout tech kings. They can commit fantastic crimes. Their corporation can simply go bankrupt. It can just move to another country and not pay any taxes. They literally can kill people. They can meddle in the election. And they don't get prosecuted like you or I would as a normal citizen, because as a corporation, not only internationally, as you've just pointed out, but nationally in the courts, corporations are actually not culpable for the very things that we are culpable. They can kill people and get away with it legally.
Well, Mohawk Carpet in particular, where they were importing illegal aliens for the carpet industry, and some of the American citizens sued. And basically, they won, but nothing was ever done. Mohawk Carpet. What's important is that the 14th Amendment is protecting former slaves. And it creates a new status of citizen beyond just state citizenship. It creates national citizenship. It makes everybody a national citizen. But unfortunately, from the time of 1868 onward, there were only like 40 cases regarding former slaves. But there are well over 400 regarding corporations under the 14th Amendment, under Title 42, all right, the civil rights structure. So Eric Phelps and I get into the detail of this Santa Clara versus the Southern Pacific Railroad case, where the corporation, by the clerk, not by the Supreme Court, but the clerk in the blurb at the head of the case essentially summarizes the case by saying that a corporation is a person, right, for the purposes of civil rights, and that was the beginning of the whole problem in the late 1800s, and that but there are close to 400 cases for corporations and maybe 30 at the most for actual former slaves, right? And discrimination based upon being a former slave. So it's a very serious issue, and I'm fighting that for a long time. I don't choose the little stuff. I figure the bigger the bigger the issue you shoot at, maybe you can hit something a little lower down. But it's important to put that stuff on the record. Nobody talks about this.
If you go after corporations,
but I know,
that's the biggest, Christopher. Because when you go after corporations, that's the biggest to me, because it reminds me of the British East India Company, the Dutch East India Company, corporations,
yes, of course.
And they were merchants with a sword, they called it. They traded with a sword, and they had armies bigger than countries, and they basically set up imperialism.
The Rockefellers down in Venezuela, right?
I think they're still going on. I think that kind of corporate control just metamorphosed a bit, but not that much, and still goes on to this very day. And TPP, perfect example.
Blackwater, now a different name, is one of them. But
exactly.
Yep.
And with TPP, international corporations would be able to sue our country because we decided perhaps not to do as much business with them. So somehow once you start business with TPP and international corporations, you don't get to back off, and they have more rights than nations. This is insanity. Things are upside down. We're not supposed to have monarchies or people with titles here in America, and yet the courts are like a monarchy unto themselves. Each court is like its own kingdom, and each lawyer is an esquire. It's like they are landed gentry, and we are the plebeians. We don't have any representation. We hardly have a standing being a citizen, but a corporation has a standing that's beyond us. I can't get that. It makes me very upset and makes me think that courts are so corrupt. I have such respect for people like you who can work through the court system, because I know that's the way where things really move on a big scale, is in the courts. And
not any longer. Nope, it's administrative process.
Well, that's what Michael points out.
Administrative Procedures Act.
Yep, that's what he points out. It's no longer even the courts, it's these administrative courts. And it's the clerks, it's the people who just say, no, sorry, you don't get your case before the court. Sorry. Why? Because I'm a clerk. And I don't like the fact that you didn't double space it. And therefore, I'm going to throw it out. I mean, like you
that happens too.
Well,
all the time.
You got up to third level of the Supreme Court clerks, but you didn't get through all 6 levels. So procedural.
I still haven't gotten that package back yet. I'm waiting for that package still, and I haven't gotten it back from Friday. I forgot the date at this point. There's a lot of things that have happened. I think it was Friday. I'm losing. I've been looking at the 17 intelligence agencies, and I've discovered new ones. I never thought there were so many. Geospatial. It's just. I'm looking at all of their budgets, and it's quite amazing. This is what I'm doing, and I'd like to keep everybody up to date on it, because I think it's got some importance to it. And I don't think there's anybody else that they've heard of that's actually doing something about it. I am doing something about it.
I like your new approach, because the crooked OpTech software that rules basically the whole world's elections are ruled by Lord Malik Brown with the help of Jimmy Carter and the CIA in Venezuela, started the software OpTech, and that controls all the different voting machines we have in America and throughout the whole world. OpTech is used everywhere. And so when you're looking at the American Organization of States and you're actually asking the question, would you like to have a legal election? Well, that also includes America now, because you see it on the news. Here you are fighting it with your writ of mandamus. You take it as far as you can. They turn around and try to intimidate you, a guy who's been doing this for years. But somehow when you bring to their attention something about elections, it really makes them mad, right? So why is that? Well, I was
surprised. I was. And they replaced a guy who was friendly and said he wanted to hear what I had to say.
I know.
Right? And they said, well, he was new. He was a what do you call, new friggin' guy, and we sent him off on an international trip.
Unfortunately, yes.
I have to find out if he's still alive.
He got muscled probably by a Secret Service senior executive service member who came in, put on a bulletproof vest to make it look like he was a field agent, and with his soy boy handshake, let you know that the guy who was friendly to you, who wanted to pass this up the line properly, will never be seen from again, perhaps, because he befriended somebody who was trying to do the right thing. That's just disturbing.
Well, he snapped at me, Douglas. He snapped at me as soon as I mentioned senior executive service. He says, I know, and I'm not going to discuss it. That's what he said.
Yeah, because he's on the payroll.
And I said, didn't you read anything I wrote? And he said, no. And I said, well, didn't General Counsel? He says, I don't work for General Counsel. I'm Secret Service. I work directly for Homeland Security and Kirstjen Nielsen. And she's considering you a problem. So something's wrong with Kirstjen Nielsen, guy.
Kirstjen is supposed to be interested in anything to do with election rigging. That's her number one job right now. And guess what? She has 2
weeks to report on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And after the election, there's going to be a report in 2 weeks. Well, Trump has already said the election is infected. It's wrong. And in my own words, it's basically a fraud. And he said go with the decisions that were made that night before the magical ballots started to show up, with the majority of them being for Democrats. And what are you going to do? Because it's a state's right. So when the federal government gets involved, that lawyers get involved. Mark Elias from Perkins Coie went down, and he's fighting. He's going to fight for every single fake vote that Brenda Snipes brings forward in Broward County, the home of the FBI counterintelligence, where we get to have Parkland shooting, where we get to have the MAGA bomber, where we get to have 5 different other people who went out as serial killers, mass murderers, who all went through the FBI. Every one of those people had been apprehended by the FBI, and the MAGA bomber had been released in that county 14 times for crimes that you or I would have gone to jail for, but we're going to believe that he was a MAGA bomber. He wasn't a MAGA bomber. He was a Pelosi bomber. And what we got to see is through the smoke and mirrors, because they're just trying to play games with us. And I like it when someone like you goes to court and holds somebody's feet to the fire in their own system, because that's what's screwing up Robert Mueller right now, is the Russian company, the catering company, can't think of the name of it. It came over, and he never expected any Russian to ever show up. And this company shows up and says, your whole case is a joke. And his case is
discovery. They wanted discovery. Discovery.
And in that discovery, he couldn't give it to them. And so what did he do? He made up millions. He took everything on the internet that was in Russian and gave it to them and said, you see, here's millions and millions of pieces of Russian information from the internet that shows that you're guilty. And they said, did you translate any of it? And they said, no, we don't have translations of any of it. Well, then how do you know it's from us, or how do you know it meddled in the election? See, it's a lawyer trick. Go ahead, take this 2 million pieces of information, and we're going to try to defer this. How many times have they tried to defer that case? It's unbelievable. Putin's catering service, they call it. I can't remember the name of it, but it's just a joke that he's indicted all these Russians. Concord, that's it. Concord Catering. It's very nice.
And the Concorde isn't even flying anymore.
Betsy is always around, but you never know where. You look up, you look down. Sometimes she just comes through the machine. Anyway, the point is, that's our boss, Betsy. And what we're saying here is, what you have just gone through is nothing more than outright bullying from the top down after you did the thing that most people are applauding you for your patriotism and for doing exactly what Trump said. I think that's very, very, very wrong.
But it was all I could do to stop laughing. I was laughing in his face.
I know you.
Yeah.
The guy tries to intimidate you, and you laugh at him, and he's like, hey, wait, I got a bullet. I got a gun. Why aren't you intimidated, Mr. Strunk? You're making me mad. I could see you doing this in your nice suit, even in your sandals.
No, it's a beautiful suit. It's a really nice suit.
You had a whole bag full of the research literally the lawsuits you've already brought to show
all the bound volumes of my depository trust and clearing and the seed case in 2014-15. My case up in Syracuse regarding the California illegals voting and New York illegals voting in 2016, December, when I filed that. That was with Bob Dornan, who was one of my special witnesses. I had my prior cases at the U.S. Court of Appeals of the Armed Forces defending absentee ballots for my military, and my one against the 21 trillion black off-the-books money against General Miley, who was essentially covering up theft at the Pentagon. And the point is that somebody's got to say this stuff, and people have got to sort of throw it over the wall or slip it under the door or something like that, because it's got to go into the permanent record. Well, and once it's into the permanent record, it has a life of its own.
Absolutely.
And I want to see what the Matrix looks like.
Well,
okay.
Everything you just said is music to the ears of our subscribers, because what you're doing is you're fighting the evil that we all know is there, and we always say, well, how come no one's fighting it? Well, you are fighting it. Now, let's go back to what you're doing right now. So when you go to the American Organization of States and you work through their human rights group, are you going to say this is against human rights for this type of election meddling to go on? Is that going to be your angle?
I'm going to use the International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights, which has no standing in the United States, but it has standing in the OSS court, the Inter-American Court, because all of those countries have signed on to it. And I think the reason because they've signed on to it, and they actually give their people in the banana republics, a fruit basket, they're actually getting the ability to vote and have it counted, that it's going to prove, the United States has got egg all over its face. Okay, we're embarrassed. We're very embarrassed. And that the fact that it takes England and whomever else, to come in and run vote fraud through electronics, it's outrageous stuff. I think there'll be, and the fact that my associate speaks 5 different languages, he's going to take my letter, write it in those languages, and we're going to send it to the equivalent of their Secretary of State, right? Or to their president or the president, and serve them and request that they pay attention. But I'm going to take the writ, and I'm going to go in and explain if the court systems were of any value, and they're not, they're serving corporate interests, that, what reason would Facebook own the Supreme Court? And it obviously does. It's, I'm going into the offshore accounts of all of our elected officials, and certainly the OAS has something to say about that. And I haven't composed the letter yet. I'm working on it, but I'm into the medium-term notes, which bridge the time of the elected office when they're essentially bought off. All of our congressmen are bought off.
I like what you're doing because it gives these elected officials in these other nations, the other Americas, Central America, South America, a chance to say, we're kicking out Jimmy Carter and Lord Malik Brown's op-tech manipulation of our election. Kick them out. Not only that, we're going to kick out all of Mitt Romney's election machines from Hart InterCivic, and we're going to kick out all the Sequoia machines and all the Dominion machines and all the Diebold machines, and we're going to do it by paper, and we're going to ink everybody's thumb, and we're going to show America that if they want to use any digital anything with an election, it will be rigged. And we're going to make sure that the representatives from the non-government organizations like Democracy Now! And the dozen other ones that George Soros pays money to, and the United Nations Election Commission, and the U.S. Election Commission that goes and sticks its nose in everybody else's election in every country in the world, and we do exit polls, which aren't even accurate, and then we determine whether that's election is correct. Plus, we run it through OpTech, and we run it through our machines. So it is about time that all the other nations in the world, even if America doesn't, kick those machines out of their countries and get OpTech out of their elections, because it is rigged, and it's been rigged since the 70s when the CIA worked with the United Nations and Lord Malik Brown, who is in the Privy Council, and Jimmy Carter to go to Venezuela and to create the first rigging there. Same exact software. And it's still going on to this day. And what we just saw in Florida and what we're seeing all over the country, any place anybody looks, the rigging, if it's digital, goes all back to the same OpTech software. And then they have other fail-safes that we've been revealing again and again recently. Michael McKibben and myself just did a few audios on this. And there's these companies like Cloudflare and Entrust and Global Sign and all these other companies. They have the encryption keys, so they're the man in the middle. So hello, other nations. You have a man in the middle. If you're using anything digital, it's rigged in a dozen different ways. And I love what you're doing, because one way or the other, this sticks America's nose in the dirty election that's going on here right now, right under our nose right now. Brenda Snipes needs to be in jail, and she's not. Why not? And we can go into why, and I'm sure you can give some real great insight. But when you give the states rights and the federal government's fighting it, and they don't tell us that it's we the people's right. It's our election. It isn't Brenda Snipes' election. It isn't the Secretary of State's election or the federal election or the state election. It's our election. And people like you show us what we need to do to take our elections back.
Well, it's the Monroe Doctrine. We actually have United States Code, which prevents interference, and that I think Trump is the right guy. He's got his executive orders, and we've got the law. We don't need any more law. All we need is somebody with a backbone, and we've got that. And we need to put together a Western Hemisphere defense against, as far as I'm concerned, it's the Germans running the Chinese. The Chinese are being used by the Jesuits that came in, in force after the Boxer Rebellion and certainly after World War I. But that I want to clearly differentiate the Western from the Eastern Hemisphere, and that as a polemic historically, which we've got a lot of history and documents which relate to that, preventing interference into our hemisphere. So I'll be approaching this Inter-American Commission for Human Rights from that historical standpoint, in which all of those countries in the Western Hemisphere are our allies to the Organization of American States. It was Reagan who went against it. Reagan denied any ability to take a thrust of jurisdiction over whether or not we had even screwed up, right? And Reagan instead went with his recognition of the Vatican and with Ambassador Wilson. We for this first time recognized the Vatican, which we had not done because it was clear that the Vatican was involved in the assassination of Lincoln.
Well, you're hitting that nail on the head, because you're talking about sovereignty. You're talking about our sovereignty being subsumed, our sovereignty having continuous Jesuit sabotage towards it, our sovereignty being undermined by the Jesuit Council on Foreign Relations, our sovereignty. And we want to talk with you and your friend Eric about Jesuitism and the way that Jesuitism has come into our world, because so many people ask us about that. And I try to help them with it, but it is a very, very, very complicated thing. So would you be willing to chat with us, you and Eric, about the question of Jesuitism in the world?
Absolutely. We speak maybe one. He teaches 36 hours a week, and when it comes to talking about the Jesuits, he and I will go anywhere to do it. And it's a thorny issue. People don't understand. It's a military organization. It's the Praetorian Guard for the Vatican, and that they are a very dangerous organization, and that notwithstanding what Blaise Pascal said, which to allow them to exist would undermine the fundamentals of morality of the Catholic Church, and he was right.
And it's happened.
That was his letters to the provincial.
That was a prediction, and it happened. Christopher.
Right.
We're going to excitingly get this out immediately, because people have been chomping at the bit saying, where is he? What's he doing? Okay. Oh, yeah. They want to know what you're up to, because really, you are the guy. You're like the Paul Revere, You're the guy who's leading the charge, and you're carrying the banner, and we're all going, hey, there's only like one of these guys. And he knows a couple others. We need all of them, and we need you, and we need to support you in your charge with your writ of mandamus, taking it wherever you have to take it so that election rigging will stop. And so I just want to thank you for being the patriot that you are and not being intimidated.
Well, look, Eric teaches. He has governmental students in his class all the time. Generals and FBI and CIA and people come in just to find out why they're in such a mess. He's had a number of generals. He's had a number of generals in his class,
Wow.
and which is an eye opener for me.
Well, we have some
So-
generals in our subscribers, but we probably have some presidents too. And these presidents need to listen to you and realize that what you're telling them is what they simply need to understand, because you are giving them simple solutions. You're going back to the heart of the problem, the historical origins, the genesis, and then you're giving them the solutions. So we're going to sign off now, and we're going to set up a time
All
with
right.
you and Eric soon. And again, from all of our subscribers, all of our listeners, all of our followers, and Betsy, her team, the Conclave, thank you so much. You are a great patriot.
Yeah, happy Veterans Day.
Thank you so much, you veteran. I'm a veteran too, and man,
Yeah, I know. That's what I said.
we love our flag, don't we? Thank you, Chris.
Well, I'd like to get the fringe off of it, but at least from the land side of things, the Navy still has it on, but that's
right.
neither here nor there.
All
It's
right.
mostly there, not here. But
We will talk to you
Good night.
soon. Thank you so much.